You've joined today's webinar, Surviving the Job, Developing the 11 Best Practices into Your Daily Routines. Your presenters are Brian McQueen from the National Volunteer Fire Council and John M. Buckman III from the International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officers Section. They are passionate about this topic and will explain how to incorporate these life-saving practices into your daily routines in order to reduce your exposure risks and protect yourself and your fellow firefighters from occupational cancer. And with that, I pass it on to John and Brian.
Well, Meg, thank you very much for those that opening remarks. And Brian McQueen has joined us, and he'll be coming in here in just a few seconds here. But thanks for everybody for coming today. We are excited about this topic. This is a big deal for the National Volunteer Fire Council and the International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officers Section to have this collaborative approach to deal with cancer and how to reduce your exposure. And that is really the key to what we're doing. So what happened about a year and a half ago was the two organizations came together and found people who had a passion for this issue. And Scott Beecher was the lead for this and brought people together to help write the document. So the document was written from the street level. Jim Seavey, who was an officer in both the National Volunteer Fire Council and the International Association of Fire Chiefs VCOS section, was the one who drove the issue for both organizations. And we dedicate the report and all of our presentations in Jim Seavey's memory. For you, those of you that may not know, Chief Seavey lost his life, lost the battle to cancer about 4 months ago. And it's indeed a privilege for us to be able to continue to recognize him for his contribution to this report. So with that, one of our goals today is, this is how to implement the Lavender Ribbon Report, and Brian's going to go over the 11 best practices here in the next, but it's a common sense approach. Remember that you can't eat this elephant all at the same time. There are 11 best practices. Figure out which ones you need to implement today, and then look at how you implement the rest of them at a later date. But it's also, as we've been out and delivering this program, and Brian and I just delivered it last week in Syracuse, New York at the Chiefs Conference, we reinforced the people that this is about reducing exposures, not eliminate. There's no way that we can still be in the fire business and eliminate our exposures to cancer. So that's the goal of this course: common sense approach and reduce exposures and not eliminate. Brian?
Hey, thank you. And Meg, thank you so much for that introduction. You know, having been a occupational cancer survivor now, and, you know, you always look upon yourself and saying, you know, how could cancer be affecting me or even killing me from the job that I like to do as a volunteer firefighter? And I think we ask ourselves that question so many times when even, you know, you or your loved ones or somebody like that is diagnosed with the word cancer. So, you know, we're here today to, you know, lay some groundwork for you, a building blocks type of a setup, like John said, to be able to protect yourself, your families. All know that when we go home at the end of the day and we walk through that door, we're going home to our loved ones. We want to make sure that we're going home in a healthy manner, and that we're protecting them as well. So some of the objectives that we're going to be going across today is we're going to do it on a two-part program. Fire chiefs and officers, they're going to be aware of the duty that they do, you know, and as John said, this is not going to be an end-all type of a program. It's going to be something that, you know, you can take back with you and implement it in your fire stations and in your daily practices over the course of the year. So again, we will give you some of those ideas. We'll share some of the things that have worked for us and for other departments across the United States, and hopefully give you a better understanding of the need to put this 11 best practices in place from the top down and the bottom up. You know, and I think what we need to do is understand that cancer has no limitations, None whatsoever. Doesn't have an age limitation, doesn't have a color limitation. It doesn't have any limitations, you know, and so we need to realize that firefighters have got to accept the possibility that cancer is out there, and we need to take every step possible to protect ourselves. You know, we back in our meeting, the National Volunteer Fire Council meeting that we had in Kearney, Nebraska, our chairman at that time, Ken Fontenot, said, listen, cancer is an epidemic in both the career and the volunteer fire service. And we really need to do something. We need to make people aware of it every day when they walk through that station, the doors of that station, whether for a training, a meeting, a fundraiser, or an incident, that they need to be aware of a best practice type setup that they can use to protect themselves from cancer. So as John said, a group of us got together from VCOS and from the NVFC, along with our cancer subcommittee from the National Volunteer Fire Council, and worked with those people that you see on the bottom of this poster, basically through California Casualty Firefighter Cancer Support Network, the NFFF, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, VCOS, the IAFC, and the NVFC, to put these 11 steps together, these 11 best practices that is not going to be done overnight. It's not going to be done maybe tomorrow, but it will be done over the course of the year. And it's something that we can take, all 11 of these practices, and build them into what we do in our SOPs, SOGs, or whatever you call them.
All right, thanks, Brian. So how do we implement one or all of the 11 steps? Well, somebody's got to be responsible, just like in anything that we do within an organization. And so we've laid out here the leadership responsibility. We're not saying this is the fire chief's responsibility. It's just somebody is designated as the leader on reducing carcinogen exposures for firefighters. So what you do is you look for developing policies and procedures. The NVFC and the VCOS have sample policies, departments that have implemented some of these steps already. So if you need copies of policies and procedures, you can email either one of the organizations and get that, or just Google search and you'll probably be able to find that. You got to acquire the equipment. You got to train the members in the policies and procedures. You implement those policies and procedures. And the hardest part here, especially in the volunteer fire service, is to enforce those policies and procedures. But with like with anything that we write, standard operating procedures or standard operating guidelines, whatever you call them, there has to be enforcement. There has to be some way that we make sure that people follow the rules and that those rules are enforced fairly and firmly. And then we, as with any policy and procedure, we need to have a review. Number one, to make sure we're following them, make sure that they were written appropriately and that they're able to be done by our department. Not every department can implement these best practices in the same way. You have to be able to be flexible and make smart decisions based upon the size and type of organization that you come from. Brian?
Sure. Your best practice number one, it's really common sense. You know, we know that throughout the building industry, there's 84,000 chemicals in the building industry today. So the need for us to protect ourselves throughout the entire environment, from the initial call to the end call to the end of the call, is very important. And wearing your personal protective envelope is crucial, you know, throughout the entire environment. Whether you're a interior structural firefighter, whether you're an engineer working in a smoke-filled environment on the top of a pump panel, or whether you're a fire investigator, the need for you to protect yourself from cancer is crucial. And we realize that cancer enters the body two ways. You know, it can be absorbed through our skin dermally, or we can breathe it in through our lungs. And this protection, the personal protective envelope that we wear, will assist us in our need to keep cancer out of our bodies. Practice number two, wearing a hood. You know, developing a second hood policy throughout your department. Very, very simple. You know, we're not here to promote any one hood. We are here to promote the use of a protective hood. And again, when you come out of that structure, you'll see in this picture that you have here, you know, this was a firefighter that was actively involved in an initial fire attack. So you'll see the proper use of not just taking that hood and pulling it down around your neck, but just removing that hood and doffing those gloves and pulling them off in a correct way. You know, when I came down with cancer, I came down with non-Hodgkin's B-cell lymphoma, and it was a swelling of a growth on the side of my neck. And I'll be honest with you, brothers, sister firefighters, I had the dirtiest gear in my fire station. I thought it was a badge of courage. And I was that person that took that dirty hood, and in between, you know, the drinks and the breaks and the rehabs, I took that hood and I dragged it down underneath my chin and let it go around my neck, never realizing that those chemicals and those carcinogenic agents were actually sitting in, you know, inside of that hood. And again, the sweat, the pores opening from those fires, it's just amazing. That could have been soaking in. And then we look at best practice number 3. You know, immediately following the exit, immediate from an IDLH atmosphere, you should begin gross decon. You know, and we talk about gross decon in all different types of scenarios. Here, I'm in central New York area. You know, we get anywhere between 60 to 120 inches of snow throughout the winter. And the type of decon that we do in exterior of a fire is crucial. It doesn't hurt. I mean, the cold water could freeze iron, but why not take a brush? Why not take a dry brush and wipe yourself off, you know, until you're able to get to a perfect decontamination setup? So again, you know, we need to realize the environments that we're in. We need to manage the way that we do decon. And again, it's all going to be different throughout the United States of America. The hot zone, you know, the major parts of where we are within the fire structure. You know, take a look at the hot zone. All right, you're looking at there with the firefighter there in the hot zone. Should we have you know, the full protective envelope, and then the warm zone? You know, where are we? Do we actually isolate ourselves? And do we, in a command structure, in an initial attack structure, implement the hot, the warm, and the cold zones within each of our departments? Have we built those into our building, into our SOPs or SOGs? Going along with best practice number 3, your PPE should then be placed in a sealed plastic bag, a clear plastic bag, because we all hear of the stories when we put them in a regular dark plastic bag, and that plastic bag gets placed in a fire station and nobody knows what it is, and all of a sudden you see it found out in the dumpster out and back. And it has happened, trust us. I'm sure John will be able to vouch for that as well. So again, we need to make sure we take that gear off. You know, we put it into a clear plastic bag or a hermetically sealed type of a container, and we make sure that we bring that back to the station and use the necessary cleaning apparatus that we need to prepare that turnout gear for our next battle.
Yeah, let me add something here, Brian.
Sure.
As it says on the slide there about off-gassing. You know, if you've been in the fire service a long time, and Brian and I both have been around for a while, you know, when we used to have a structure fire, it was so cool for us to be able to put our gear in our car and be able to smell that fire for the next 3 to 5 days. Now we realize that that was dangerous. That was poisoning our body. It was poisoning our family. Gear has been known to off-gas at least 72 hours after an exposure to a hot zone experience. So we encourage you to keep that gear in a plastic bag, get it cleaned. Do not store it in your personal, the trunk of your car where your family is going to be until you get it decontaminated and cleaned off. Back to you, Brian.
Yeah, you know, we just had somebody, somebody pop up on the screen that someone has to be responsible. It says the statement is misleading. You know, we know how to run a command structure. The command structure has to be a top-down, bottom-up type of a structure. So you know, you're right. Somebody does have to be there. And hear this person's, you know, make a statement that, you know, we've got to make sure that we do assign that. And we know, you know, we talk about the volunteer fire service across the United States of America. Some of us are struggling with our recruits, you know, so, you know, we may have to bring a mutual aid company and to assist us with this. And, you know, we've got to make sure that we have a safety officer assigned, you know, while we are there. So these are things that we need to do. But again, we don't do them every day. So we need to make sure we blend these types of actions into our practices throughout our training aspects and our incidents. You know, rehab number 3, your drop zone. Do we have a rehab area set up? You know, I think, as I said earlier, you know, the numbers are crucial. You know, we do need help. You know, there's some departments that are rolling out with just 5, you know, in a rig, and that's it. That's all they have. So, you know, the use of box alarms and mutual aid is being even more prevalent for us now, you know, in the volunteer fire service. You know, resist the urge to consume food, you know, until you make sure you've gone through a decon. Again, how many times do we have great ladies auxiliary or support services, the Red Cross, or people that come out and bring us our drinks and our food that we eat? And, you know, how many times have us in the past, you know, I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, we pulled our gloves off and grab onto that sandwich or that donut or whatever and put it in our mouth without realizing that those chemicals were still sitting, you know, on our hands. Lower your bunker pants. You know, get the heat reduced inside of your groin area and your lower pant area, because we know that you know, your body temperature exceeds over 400 degrees. You know, in a incident that involves a structure fire. Then again, maybe we need to reassign. You know, take a look. You were in an interior structural attack. Maybe you need to have a different reassignment. Maybe you go to an exterior. Maybe you support the engine company pump operator.
Yeah, Brian, let me interject again on this.
Sure.
Brian mentioned about taking the gloves off. And I think back to recruit class, and I visit recruit classes or to participate with recruit school, and thinking, wow, we actually have to teach you how to take your gloves off. Well, yes, we do. We need to teach you how to take your gloves off in a way in which you do not expose your body to the products of combustion, which have carcinogens in them. We encourage you to go to the Illinois Fire Service Institute website. They have a video on how to do that. But if you think about it, you know, you come out, you undo your mask, your face piece, and then you take your one glove off with your gloved hand. Then you take your ungloved hand and you take the other 2 gloves off. And now we just decontaminated that clean hand. And now we go over and get food. And I realize some of you say, well, that slide you had a couple minutes ago with that firefighter had a drink of water in his hand and he had not been gross deconned. You're correct. The gross deconning process is something that you'll have to decide exactly when that occurs. So back to you, Brian.
Yeah. So again, you know, we're bringing off some, you know, some really great points to you, and you know, we all have to think about the fire service and the fires that we actually are responding to now are really basically hazardous material incidents is what we're responding to, and you know, we know the practices that we use in a hazmat situation. You know, we're trying to take some of those practices and blending them in with our fire tech, but when we're back to the station, you know, it just doesn't stop there. You know, there's things that we need to do, you know, when we are back at the station. And, you know, you're seeing more and more of the new fire stations that are being designed that are built around the cancer initiative. You know, while we're back at the station, again, we talked about the various types of weather conditions that we are all in. And again, you know, we need to make sure that we're going through a thorough decon of our gear back. And when we talk about our gear, we're not just talking about the bunker pants and the coats and the gloves. You know, don't forget the helmets. You know, the helmets where you know, we put those on when we go into battle every time. And you know, it's very, very important for us to make sure that we decon our helmets in the interior of our helmets as well. Our equipment, you know, we've got to make sure that all of that equipment is decon and decon thoroughly. The apparatus. When have you ever thought about deconning a piece of apparatus? But in some weather conditions, in some places across the United States of America, it just doesn't give us that chance. You know, we have to go back back to the station, and sometimes we do have to put our pants on, our bunker pants. So we need to make sure that we do decon that apparatus there. Why not make it a decon Sunday? You know, come in and do some things on a Sunday, put a breakfast on in your fire station, decon your apparatus, decon your personal protective equipment. You know, do a hood cleaning activity. There's so many things you can do that you're going to be able to build camaraderie within your team of firefighters, and again, enhancing the reasons why we're doing cancer prevention education in the fire service. Best practice number 4, making sure that we're able to have some, through the gross decon processes, that we have, whether they're baby wipes or fire wipes or whatever, rescue wipes, whatever we use. It's crucial for us to have these on our apparatus and to be able to use them when we start to decon ourselves. The neck, the face, the arms, the hands, making sure you're wiping every part of that body, the open skins where the pores are, and getting that black soot and the carcinogen agents and stuff off of your body. You know, it's like I said, I thought so many times when I had that growth on the side of my neck, and I still feel it every day, you know, was it caused because I was just not protecting myself the way I should? And again, every day you think about will cancer come back? And again, you always think of, what can I do? What can I make my brother or sister firefighter that stands beside me or their locker sits next to me? How can I help them protect themselves so that they don't have to suffer like other people that have to suffer a cancer battle? So it's very simple. Baby wipes are very cheap. You know, you have a ladies auxiliary, you have a youth group, you have a junior group that wants to do something for a fundraiser. Why not do this and making sure that all of our apparatus have some type of a cleaning material that we can use, that we're able to clean our neck, our face, our arms, and our hands.
This is probably, along with best practice number 1, best practice number 4, are probably the 2 best practices that you could implement immediately with little cost to the fire department. Yes, our firefighters are going to have to accept they'll wear their SCBA during overhaul, and they'll also have to accept that when they come out of a hot zone experience, that they will have to clean the soot off of their body. Brian just mentioned it. And, you know, we do that with EMS. We are scared to death of bloodborne pathogens, so we most always wear our gloves and our eye protection, and sometimes even our breathing protection. And it's the same thing here now. Cancer is an epidemic. We can reduce the chances of you contracting cancer by doing a couple simple things. So if you're a leader out there who's thinking about, well, what do we do first? Brian and I would highly recommend best practice number 1, wear your SCBA during overhaul, and then best practice number 4 is get you some baby wipes, fire wipes, whatever you get, and then have your people use them when they come out of that hot zone experience.
You know, I think
best practice number. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
But I think it's so crucial too. You know, we think about it. You know, everybody says, "Oh, the cancer epidemic in the fire service is there," but you know, it is there. But when have we known a fire service or a firefighter to back down from something? You know, I think if we educate our firefighters at the grassroots status, you know, at our recruiting classes, at our mentoring classes, at our state fire classes, if we can begin to educate them and to share with them the ways that they can take care of themselves, this epidemic is going to go away. But we've got to start at the grassroots. It's got to be a building blocks type of a program, and I think it needs to start now.
Best practice number 5. Every firefighter, you know, since the creation of firefighters by Benjamin Franklin, wants to get their picture on the front page of the paper with their face dirty, with their gear all dirty, products of combustion all over their gear, insulation, so on and so forth. But What you're doing is you're exposing your body to those carcinogens, and we need to reduce that opportunity. And one of those ways here is best practice number 5, and this is going to create somewhat of a challenge for the volunteer firefighter. Volunteer firefighters now who do home response, now need to have a go bag in their car. That go bag has a pair of socks, maybe even underwear, shorts, or a pair of blue jeans, or some kind of pants, or a t-shirt, or some kind of shirt that they can immediately after an event, hot zone experience, they change out of those dirty clothes and they get them washed. We would also highly recommend that you don't take dirty clothes home and wash them with the other family clothes. Now, realizing that's hard to do, and not every fire station in this country has a washing machine. But if you have to take your personal clothing home to be washed, here is what we would recommend. Wash it by itself in that washing machine, and then once you remove that material, it's been washed, then run that washer through one additional cycle. Throw some soap in there and run that washer through a cycle with nothing in it. That's you're taking the best steps you can to reduce contamination of that washing machine. But we got to start changing our clothes as soon as possible after fire when they've been exposed to products of combustion, and isolate them in a trash bag. Probably I shouldn't say trash bag, we should change that, into a clear plastic bag until washing is available. And if you take it home and you can smell that fire smell in your house, guess what? You're off gassing and you're poisoning your family. So we encourage you to get these personal clothing washed before you go home. Who's going to have to be deconned? That's a command decision. Somebody's got to be in charge on the fire scene. Somebody's got to determine who's going to be deconned, who's going to be deconned on the scene, and whose gear is going to be deconned even when they return to the station. You have to have a policy in place. Somebody's got to make that decision. The pump operator may never get in the smoke, so he or she may not need to be deconned. But on this house fire today, because of where the apparatus was parked and the wind direction, the pump operator was enveloped in smoke a couple times and may need to be deconned along with the other firefighters. But somebody's got to make that decision. Then how long are you going to be out of service while you're doing decon? Brian mentioned cleaning the apparatus, deconning the apparatus. If we're talking about an ambulance and we've had a traumatic event where we now have blood all over that ambulance could be out of service for as long as an hour or more. Our fire apparatus may be out of service if we have put a whole lot of products of combustion back in that cab. We need to get that cab washed out. We need to wash the seats. We need to clean all the surface materials where these products of combustion have been. So you're going to have to make a decision who, what, and how much decon is going to be done by, that decision is made by the incident commander. Brian?
Yeah. You know, documentation is so crucial when being diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis. When I sat in New York City at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, across from 5 nationally known oncologists, and then they ask you what your what your job employment is, and do you have any hobbies? And my hobby was being a volunteer firefighter. And for the next 45 minutes, I was drilled about all the different types of fires I went in, what chemicals I faced, have I fought an entire fire. At that time, it was 37 years in the fire service. I couldn't go back to all of those fires and recognize them. So the need to have documentation is very, very crucial. And again, this should be a standard practice that should be done in every fire station. And if fire stations don't do that, we need to take it upon ourselves to be able to do that. You know, there's so many resources out there that have exposure tracking records. There's things now you can download free off your app on your phone and document all of your exposures. But it's so important when you have somebody tell you that you have cancer, and the need for them to understand what you did and the job that you did it's so important for us to have that information and that documentation. And with the age of smartphones and technology now, it should be made so much easier for us. But documentation is crucial.
I'm going to reinforce what Brian said, and I'm sorry if we repeat this, but this is, again, so crucial. This is to the firefighters out here, to every one of us who do interior fire suppression operations, it is your responsibility to do this documentation. You're the one that might have that 6-letter word said to you by a doctor. You have cancer. You are the one who's going to have to prove that it was occupational related. I'm not saying the fire departments are not good at keeping records, but I'm telling you, do not depend on your fire department to keep this kind of record. Brian mentioned you can get these apps today. There's Infors out there. There's a new reporting system that's NFORS. Google that, a free app that you can use on your smartphone. There are several companies that have now developed apps that you can use. We have a National Cancer Registry that is starting up so that we can start to prove to the medical community and to our elected officials that we are being poisoned, that firefighters are being poisoned because of their job. And this documentation, if you can't do it electronically, then do it with a paper. If at the minimum, you need to document the date, what you did, how much exposure you had, what kind of chemicals or smoke you were involved in. That's the minimum. And then I would encourage you to also, when you wash your gear after the event, include that in that documentation, because that's going to show that you did things that as a person, you took responsibility for cleaning your gear, and you document that. So when somebody says, oh, well, you could have prevented this if you would have done this or done that. Well, today, washing your gear, washing your personal clothing are the two things that we know that you can do to reduce those carcinogens. So we know how much people, especially firefighters, we know we like to fill out paperwork. Not really. Nobody likes documentation, but this is a crucial component, as Brian said, to making sure that if you have that word said to you, you've got documentation to prove that workers' comp should be covering you versus you accident and health insurance. And there's a big difference in coverages between workers' comp and accident and health. So probably beat you up a lot on this one, but this is, again, as Brian said, use that word crucial. It is so crucial to your health and wellness if you get cancer.
And especially with the presumptive cancer laws that are out there now, documentation is just, it has to be there. This document you see there is from the Fire Service Occupational Cancer Alliance. Just all you have to do is Google them and take a look at it. There's so many resources, the FRC resources that are out there, the National Volunteer Fire Council, VCOS, IAFC, they all have them. It just takes initiative. It takes time for you to say, hey, it's not about me. It's about the people that I go home to every day, that I sit across the table with, that I go watch a soccer game or a little league game or a minor league game or a basketball game or a cheerleading competition. Because when you're not in the stands, your family will realize it.
So when we talk about what are we going to do, we talked about having policies and procedures. You can't beat firefighters over the head constantly about cancer. But using positive discipline, reinforcing when firefighters do the right thing, having the attitude, a proactive, positive attitude about your fire department, that we're going to help you be safer, and take a collaborative approach between labor and management, because we both have our people's best interest. We need to collaborate with labor and with management to make sure that we have fair policies that are enforced firmly and across the board. And then we need to communicate. As a leader, as a chief officer within your department, maybe as a captain on a company, you need to share the information that comes out. Be careful that you share information that is reliable, that is from a reputable source. Don't be going through stuff and and using stuff you think, well, who are these people? Make sure that whoever you have has some validated research, that has some history, that has some information that's worth sharing, and that it's valid, that it gives our firefighters good advice. So our last comment is, and then we're going to open this up for questions. I'll let Brian make some closing comments after this. But it is about being smart and being safe. Every firefighter wants to go home to their family by avoiding exposure when not necessary, neutralizing contamination, and then decon sooner rather than later. Firefighters are intelligent people, but we are going to have to, are changing some, and we've got to change some of our habits to make our business and our job much safer than it is. It's much safer tomorrow than it is today. Brian, closing comments?
Yeah, we appreciate, those that are on today. We see that there's 47 of us on today. And this is a message that we want you to take back to your departments. The National Volunteer Fire Council and VCOS have put together a great training, a train-to-trainer program called Surviving the Job, the 11 Best Practices. And what it is, it's a program that's going to be able to be taught to you with the handouts, with the Lavender Ribbon Report downloaded, with the PowerPoint that you can take back into your fire stations, and over the next year or so, begin your implementation process. Build it into your recruits, building into your training meetings, build it into your your officer meetings. And again, there's so many things that are out there now with all of the national firematic associations that, again, have all joined together, as John said earlier, and have blended together as a melting pot of fire service families to make sure that firefighters are safe and protected from cancer.
Well, Meg's still listed here. We talked faster than we thought, so we were about 7 minutes earlier, but that's okay. Earlier is better than not being able to get it done. Now, we realized that we did not cover all 11 best practices. You just can't do that in this short of a period of time. But we do encourage you to go download the Lavender Report. I'm going to give you a resource slide here in a second. But we're opening it up for questions. And so I'm going to, we'll look at the questions. Meg will feed them to us.
So we have the first question: is are forms just posted? Are the forms just posted available on download? Yes, they are. If you look through the Firefighter Cancer Alliance, you'll be able to find those on there. They are downloadable, and they are free. There are also resources that you see posted on the line right now. Another suggestion and question was, what are some suggestions for gross decon taking off your gear prior to going to rehab in cold weather? John, I think you want to touch that, like I think you had that slide.
I'm sorry, Brian, I missed part of
The
that.
question was, what are some suggestions for gross decon taking off gear prior to going to rehab in cold weather?
Well, one of the things that the report says, immediately upon leaving a hot zone, immediately dangerous to life and health event or atmosphere, that you should have gross decon. Now, we realize in implementing that part of the report that you will do gross decon before you leave the scene. But most of us have a policy that we do 2 air bottles. So you do an air bottle, you come out, you get your air bottle changed, and then you go back in, you do another air bottle. That's when you could do the gross decon. We realize that you cannot do gross decon twice. You're not going to do gross decon and walk back into a hot zone with wet gear. But again, a common sense approach. Again, I'm going to encourage you to look at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. They have research documentation that shows the simple act of brushing your gear off will eliminate 80% of the carcinogen material just by brushing your gear off. Go to the Illinois Fire Service Institute and look that up and read that report because just that simple act. So when you're talking about 20 or 30 degree weather, you brush them off, you put it in a clear plastic decon. You don't have to do the full gross decon and where you get all that gear sopping wet and you're trying to get back. But So that's why, again, you're going to need a go bag. That go bag probably going to have to be on the apparatus. We were doing a presentation the other day. I think this came up during our presentation. What about having a Tyvek suit for people to put on in cold weather? Better than going back in sopping wet gear, sopping wet underwear. So again, you got to think about how you're going to implement that one and do a little research. Right.
Hey, we have another question put out by Paul Acosta. I've heard there's talk of having engineers packing up at the fire scene while operating the truck. Have you heard of this practice? And Paul, let me answer this one. I have. And I think it all depends on the environment that the engine is placed in. And it's really a command decision, but it's not a bad practice. I see a lot of new engine companies that are coming out that are actually coming out with a pack for the pump operator in a inside cab there area where they can grab it. But again, this is a decision that's made on the fire ground, but it should have the ability for them to be able to have a pack for them, because yes, they are, depending on the wind shift, and you know how it is throughout the United States of America. It doesn't stay in one direction. That engineer, that chauffeur, that truck has to be protected. So that is a good question.
Yeah, Brian, I would tell you, I saw some 2 pieces of apparatus at the Maryland State Firemen's Association conference in Ocean City this week. And they had, the first one I walked up to it and I asked them, what's that air pack for in that compartment? And they said, oh, that's the driver's air pack. So they put it in a compartment versus putting it in the seat that the driver would be sitting in. So it's out there, and that's new apparatus. But yes, for most of us, we don't have that extra air pack for that driver. But there are times when that driver is going to need a self-contained breathing apparatus.
That's all the questions that we have. No more have been submitted, so I believe that that brings the closure of the webinar. Meg, are you going to close us up, or are we ready to shut her down? Well, one more question just popped up. Here we go. We run fire EMS and work 24-hour shifts. We only get one set of gear. So what do people do for gear the rest of the shift if they wash it down and get it wet?
Well, Brian and I both have talked about this when we do the live presentation. Just like with everybody having a second hood, the recommendation that everyone should have a second hood. When you have, and you're a smaller department, maybe you don't have a lot of fires, maybe you need to have 6 or 8 hoods in like storage or like in a locker, so that when you have a hot zone, have a fire, and you have 6 or 8 people exposed, they get a new hood. It's the same thing for that gear. If your fire department can't provide gear, maybe you have 4 to 6 extra sets of gear that we can swap out. I realize it may not fit you exactly right, but some gear may be better than others. We were on the phone the other day with a major manufacturer of gear, and we talked about this. Brian and I were, and even the manufacturer said, "Oh yeah, that's a common sense approach to solving that problem of trying to get you in some dry gear. Is have 4, 6, 8, pick a number, versus 16 or 18 sets of gear." So even the manufacturers realize there are limitations to fire departments and their ability to fund some of these things. So that's an alternative, is to have 6 or 8 sets of gear, 6 or 8 extra hoods, and have that stuff available back at the station so you can swap it out.
Yeah, and there have been studies done on this. I believe it was Miami-Dade might have been one of the fire departments in the Florida area has done a study on it. It's actually, you can find that on YouTube. So there have been some studies where they have run various scenarios using the same gear with a decon procedure put in place. So that's also a great question.
Yeah, and I will tell you that I want to do some research on this question. I've had this question before, and I'll be with the gear manufacturer in about a month, and I want to ask them this question, because in the old days, or back when we had gear that had 3 layers in it, if you got the exterior wet, you didn't get the interior wet. Well, today our gear has 2 layers. So if you get the exterior sopping wet, what are the chances of you getting a steam burn if you go back into a hot zone, you go back into do interior fire suppression operations? What's the chances of you getting steam burned or scald burns because the exterior of your gear was sopping wet? So that's something new. I've not seen much written about that. So I would encourage the gentleman who wrote that question to do a little research yourself, because I'm going to do some for me.
Yeah, and again, you know, all the firematic associations in the United States have made some ingrounds in this, especially with the grant program with the AFG, and you know they're always lobbying for the gear cleaners, you know, the extractors, the extra sets of gear and the hood and things like that. So you know that's an ongoing progress. We've made some outstanding progress with the AFG grants in the area of cancer prevention education over the last 4 years. And we will continue to do that to make sure that everybody goes home safe and healthy.
Brian, there's one more question. We just started hood swap and glove swap and are required to gross decon at the end of shift, but are still asking for 2 sets of gear often.
Well, in a perfect world, 2 sets of gear for everybody would be the ideal situation. But, and I've already said the answer, but there are limitations to some fire departments. Small volunteer fire departments of 12 to 15 members, in many cases, barely have enough money to pay for gas or pay for diesel fuel for their vehicles. So it is an ideal world for everybody to have 2 sets of gear, but you have to look at alternatives, common sense approach to making sure that we reduce our exposure to carcinogens.
Well, it doesn't look like there are any more questions, but again, I want to thank Brian and John, and really appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you for listening in, and thank you, Brian and John, for providing such valuable information. We just thought maybe another question came in. If you would like to get posters or a copy of the report, please contact the NVFC. The information is there on that slide that John had up, and we'd be glad to send that out to you. So be safe and have a good rest of your day.
All right, thanks for hosting, Meg. We appreciate it, John. Great job, and we'll talk to everybody later. And again, stay safe. It's all about your family.
Thank you all.